Good evening. Welcome to the world tonight. Car edition on my end, because grocery shopping is never fun. Anyway, welcome to the world tonight. It's March, even the 19th, 2021, and we have a
You're,
great show ahead.
you're in the
And
field. Where
yes,
are you? Are you currently in the Netherlands reporting just for the election results?
I'm parked outside, the Prime Minister's house, asking for when the coalition will be announced. I'm joking, of course. Anyway, to our first topic, which were the last week's German regional elections in Baden-Württemberg and Rhine-Pfalz. Please don't come after my German pronunciations, where both the Greens and SDP, respectively, both held on in their governments in the respective regions. If I recall correctly, Baden-Württemberg is the Greens, and Rhineland is SPD.
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm not going insane, thank God. Where the CDU got a drubbing, one of its worst performances in the last 12 months, and now its current leader, Armin Laschet, is now in the crossfire of angry criticism of leading the party to two disastrous defeats. Now I hand over to the man who finally has shown his face after being in hibernation for I don't know how many months, Mr. Adam Lawless.
Hello, it's me. Yes, it's my face. Right, so the excitement of election results. Let's delve into what these the numbers are showing us here. So let's take Baden-Württemberg as the first German state election we'll look through. So this is a very interesting state because it used to be quite conservative, or it has been a CDU stronghold for quite a long time. However, recently, the German Green Party has really found a strength here. And so in the election, thank you very much, Archangelic. And this election on the 14th of March saw the Green Party getting 32.6%, growing their percentage by about 2%. And the other big winner in that specific election was the FDP, or the Free Democratic Party. The Free Democratic Party, for those who don't know, a sort of classical liberal party, they saw one of their best results in more than more than a decade. And they received 18 seats and 10.5% of the result, so doing quite well there. And yeah, I think the losers from Baden-Württemberg are definitely the CDU. Polls showed them definitely recovering more recently. However, combining local scandals, national scandals, a poor chancellor candidate, a number of other things such as a poor vaccine response and such, led to the CDU losing 2.9% of the vote, though they didn't lose any seats, as well as the SPD. They dropped by about 1.7%, though again didn't lose any seats. And the real loser was the AfD, the Alternative for Democracy, or the right-wing populist party in Germany, who dropped their vote by 5.4%, which is just dramatic as ever. But yes. Just to look over to the chat about the summary of this election, Archangelic points out very well that the candidate, also the main person representing the Green Party, is a very interesting politician, because quite centrist, more different to sort of. I mean, this is the very interesting thing about the Green Party in Germany, is that they have a more centrist element, they also have a progressive element, and they really work together in a sort of symbiotic relationship, and depending on the state, do it very well. So yeah, ultimately, playing against trends there. So let's go to the other election in the Rhineland Palatinate state election, and Jonathan is along as well. Fantastic to have you, Jonathan. Glad to have you in the chat. So going to Rhineland, let's just try and summarize it here as well. So again, the big winner this time in this specific state was the Green Party. They went from having 5.3% of the vote to 9.3% of the vote, growing quite big there. And the other winner was quite an interesting party, the Free Voters Party, which is a bit of a more agrarian centrist version of the FDP. They're compared quite a lot, but yeah, they are definitely very, very interesting, because they had only really been focused on as a party in Bavaria. However, they've recently been able to sort of grow their vote out in a number of different states. So definitely one to watch as a a party in the future. But they themselves did very well. They went from 2.2% to 5.4%, meaning 6 seats. And yeah, the rest of it, I mean, how off to summarize it, as Arcangelic says, the leader of the SPD in the state was in a pretty dangerous position in polling. But yeah, the CDU dropping off has definitely saved them politically there. And again, so yeah, the SPD did pretty well. They lost 0.5% of the vote, but no real decrease in seats. CDU were the big losers, 4.1% of the vote, and they lost 4 seats. AFD, again, 4.3% of the vote they lost. The AFD is really dropping off recently in some states where, they were a minor presence, but yeah, definitely not doing well. And the FDP dropped off a bit as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, both results ultimately point to that thing that you talked about. At the federal level and national level, they aren't. Sorry, the CDU is not having a very good time. So ultimately, how does this play off to their chancellor candidate, Laschet, and who is the ultimately? I think it's there was a recent poll which showed that only 22% had a positive opinion of him becoming chancellor, and a 66% disapproval. So, Peter, who do you think could replace him as their candidate and really bring the party back from this sort of sliding that they're going through?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the regional elections, which are very interesting, and I'm going to start off with in the polls themselves. The CDU has been losing points on the polls, but it's all over the place. They've been losing points to the Greens, the FDP, and whatnot. So it's interesting to see where they actually try and line this, because they don't have any alternative successors in-house. I mean, that is one of the great criticisms that Merkel, in her time as CDU leader, had, that there was no alternative always in the wind for the party to go to. And the other issue they have is very straightforwardly, it's a party that's arguably run out of gas. It really does feel the CDU is a party that really doesn't have any, like, just to want to be back in power. It's just where the CDU put us back in power. But I think internally, their only replacement really that would make the most sense, we're probably going to go Marcus Soder, the minister, president of Bulgaria. He was the leader of their sister party, the CSU. I mean, he's currently still the most popular politician they can on the right, and he still has been able to credibly put himself as someone who's a leader on COVID. But yeah, I mean, that's really their only alternative, because even as we saw when Laschet won, that he still had, there was a lot of the party that wasn't very warm to having him there. Even the night he won, there were always that concern of Laschet really isn't the guy who could lead this party into prime time. Now, of course, as mentioned by Arcangelic, the CSU leader historically does not get on the leader of the right ticket. It's only happened, I believe, twice, and both times were defeats. However, of course, this might be the best chance the CSU has had of breaking that trend, and also because Soder is very popular.
Yeah.
I think what they have to do is find a leader who basically is able to get them votes back from the Greens, but also keep votes away from the FDP and other parties that are currently eating away their majority in the polls.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the national level, the AFD have been dropping off significantly. Same with the FDP; they've sort of been slowly falling when the CDU were rising. However, that sort of is reversing now, where because they're dropping, a lot of their votes are going back to the FDP, who are really successing a little bit from the alternative for Germany. So, yeah, lots of, I guess, very consequential things looking at these two state elections, because they were supposed to be, the real, the real first testing point for the CDU, but it hasn't played out very well for them.
Yeah, and I think an interesting point about the regionals to go back to that is that the Green coalition in Bretten-Runberg is rather interesting. If I remember correctly, it's the Greens, the FDP, and I'm forgetting the third party. I believe it's the third. Crap.
As
It's
in
an island.
the regional government.
Yes, the regional government.
So for Baden-Württemberg, I believe it's the Greens and the CDU who are.
All right, it's the Green and the CDU. That's right.
I
The
believe
FDP.
in Rhineland, Palatine, it is SPD, FDP, and the Greens.
Yes. Okay. My apologies, folks. Never. Again, this is why you have a second co-host to tell me I'm an idiot at times. But no, in Rhineland, Palestine, oh, whatever. Uh, uh, Never trust my pronunciations of places. That government coalition is rather interesting because there has been increased talks about that might be the governmental coalition in a federal potential election at the federal level because of what's happened. It's unlikely, but it's an interesting component if it's to be a future model.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on which one it is. I feel like the most realistic kind of coalition at this stage would definitely be the Greens and the CDU as partners. I doubt the FDP at a national level would ever want to work with
Oh
the
yeah.
Greens and SPD.
I doubt that at all. Yeah, I mean, their leaders always had no issue in the past, pretty much going right after the Greens whenever there's a time to take it, a shot at any political party.
Yeah,
Mm.
indeed. And yeah, so
But no, I was just trying to say more of the regional governmental formation coalitions are always just fascinating to look at, just because of the different ideologies at play.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they are. I feel like it will definitely be a similar continuation of what's
You're
been happening.
welcome, Arcangelic.
Yeah, Rhineland Palestine. It's a new one. Anyway, I think, is there anything else you have to add on specifically to these German regional elections?
Yeah, I mean, just generally, I think, you never want to overdo these things, but it does look like the CDU really is lost on its messaging, and it's not as a sure bet come September that they're still pretty much in the driver's seat to be the party, the largest party in a Bundestag, and that could have a big impact in the coalition deal. Should they come in second and the Greens come in first, or it's a narrow CDU victory.
Yep, I agree. Fantastic. Right, now we move on to the very exciting election topic, which I'm sure everyone was watching, as I was, because I'm not sad in that way.
You were probably cheering when a certain party did well there.
I definitely was. I'm, of course, referring to the Netherlands, where the Netherlands went to the polls and ultimately on the 17th of March, and well, technically, I believe they went 2 days before, or at least a day before, because they have
It was
extended
spread out.
voting. Yeah, exactly. But the Netherlands went to the polls, and what can I say? It was a very status quo election. So, despite just as a bit of background, the Netherlands obviously has a very interesting political system in which you only need 0.67% of the vote to actually get a single seat. So you'd think it'd be quite chaotic, and the fact that, possibly in some people's opinion, the government hasn't done very well, or certain elements of it haven't done very well. But ultimately, this election has actually resulted in a pretty status quo election, in that the current government of the VVD, which is the party of the Prime Minister, the CDA, which is sort of Christian Democracy Party, the D66 and the Christian Union have all either gained seats or lost seats, but not enough to really shift things entirely. I will, of course, get onto the more exciting things at the end of the election. But yeah, so looking more specifically at it, the VVD gained, I believe it was 2 seats, which is definitely down from recent polling, which had them much higher, but definitely still them gaining seats. So it's showing, people's confidence in the Prime Minister. Remind me again how to pronounce his surname.
It's Mark Riddle.
Riddle. Okay, cool. Yeah, it does. It's not spelled how I think it would be pronounced. Anyway, so obviously showing confidence in him. Interestingly enough, actually, if he continues in government until I believe it's 2022, then he will be the longest-serving Dutch Prime Minister, which is very exciting. Anyway, so just going further down, D66, which is a social liberal party, they gained 4 seats, definitely against the trend of what was expected from the rest of the elections, because ultimately they were seen to dropping seats, and then ultimately the exit poll showed them receiving 27 seats, but then in the end they just received 23. Still an increase of 4, but you know,
Which is the second largest party in the coalition now.
yeah, exactly. Now we go to the other government member, the CDA, is Christian Democratic Appeal. They received just 15 seats, which meant they lost 4, so falling from the the second largest party in the coalition to fall into being the third largest. Then just going to the final coalition partner, we have I believe it's just Christian Union, in which they just received 5 seats. Again, no change in the number of seats that they had overall. So that's the government coalition. Things are looking stable there. So, there are lots of questions to be, how could things change, blah, 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 blah. But we can go on to that afterwards. So let's look at the rest of the parties. So first of all, let's look at the left wing of the political spectrum. So this includes, well, I'm being very generous when I say left wing, I mean like center left to left wing. So this includes, so let me just make sure I've got the thing here. Yep, I have indeed. Right, so this includes the Green Left, which is as you'd imagine, a left-wing Green Party. They went from 14 seats to just 8, so dropped off there. Let's also go to another left-wing party, the Socialist Party of the Netherlands. They went from 14 seats, again, down to 9. So again, a loss for the left there. And then also let's go to quite a contentious one to call them left wing. They're more centre left.
Center left, I think, would be fair for them.
Yeah, the Labour Party of the Netherlands, who remained at a stable 9 seats. So as a whole, those are like the main left wing parties which have dropped off and actually lost votes. Or retained them. So not a good sign for the left of the Netherlands, who I believe have had one of the lowest vote shares in Dutch history. So quite monumental there. On the other hand, now let me try and remember what their name is. It's the Party for the Animals. There we go. The Party for the Animals, which is, as you'd imagine, a party for the animals. Any of you fans of populism updates out there, big fan of their Twitter account, their former leader is their profile picture. Yeah, they actually gained a seat. So there we go. Okay, so I mean, there are some other left-wing parties in terms of like Denk, which is representing Muslim migrants to the Netherlands. So they retained the number of seats. And they were predicted to fall, so obviously they're retained there. And yeah, that's just the main thing overall there. And then you also had, let me just again get the proper pronunciation up so I'm not.
Block.
You also have the Together Party, which is also known as Article 1 or BIJ1, which is a anti-capitalist sort of. It's just it's more of an anti-racist, minority rights specific party. They gained a representation for the first time. So yeah, sorry, just Dark Angelic said in the chat, Denk is arguably not left wing. Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're talking like socially, they are quite conservative. But yeah, anyway, so that is the sort of more general left. Let's also look at some of the other interesting parties that got for the first time, and then we'll look at how the right did in this election. So for this election, you also saw the fun introduction of Volt. Volt in the Netherlands is a Euro-federalist social liberal party. So people who want a United States of Europe, they have found their place in parliamentary representation. And this is the first time that Volt has achieved any kind of national representation, which is quite interesting. I was once a member of Volt for like a week. Yep. So let's go on to some of the other fun parties that came along.
Questions that could be asked of that.
Yeah, we're not going to answer any of them. So let's go on to some of the other new parties that entered. We have the Farmer Citizen Movement, a very interesting agrarian party that has risen recently, in which their leader and their representative has driven to the Dutch Parliament in a tractor. So that's cool. Interestingly enough, after the election, they were annoyed by the media trying to paint them as a farmers' party, which I just think is, well, that's in your name. Anyway, so let's finally go to what everyone's excited about, and what does it mean for the right wing and populism in Europe? We have a number of parties. So let's start with the Party for Freedom. Now, this is the traditional nationalist right-wing party in the Netherlands, and they were expected to be second place this time round. And this time, they were not. They fell to third place. They had 20 seats in the last election. They're down to 17, so they're 6 seats behind D66. And then the also other interesting right-wing party, which seemed dead, is the I'm trying to remember its name, Forum for Democracy. There we go. Forum for Democracy. They were expected to have completely died in terms of they were thought of getting around 2 seats, or at least polls showed them to get 2 seats, after a number of major controversies, including saying things that I'd consider as ideologically neo-Nazi, so obviously very crankish in that regard. Saying very anti-Semitic things, so I say...
Not a fun group of people.
Yeah, sorry, if I didn't say Forum for Democracy, that's what I meant. Anyway, so obviously just generally and ideologically, this is not the party that believes in democracy. That is very true. Anyway, so yeah, they are a very awful party, along with the Party for Freedom, which I mentioned earlier, both nationalist and quite ugly in that regard. They actually gained 6 seats, so they came back from the dead a little bit, which is quite interesting. And then another party that gained representation this time round was Right Answer 21, or JA21. They're like a right-wing populist party in the same regard, and they gained 3 seats from it. So that's my overall of just this thing, this election, which was very exciting. And yeah, I mean, I say it's very exciting. The amusing thing is that it just looks like the existing coalition will probably just continue in the same way with VVD, D66, CDA, and the Christian Union, because there's not much of an alternative for them to go towards. Say if you were to, I don't know, take out one party and replace it with another, the issue is that you have so many conflicting ideas on what is necessarily going to be an existing coalition. So I imagine in my theoretical prediction mindset that they ultimately will probably continue in a similar regard, because a lot of the left-wing parties that D66 could try and pull in to make the coalition more liberal likely won't want to come in at all. Either they've said they wouldn't want to, or more generally they don't believe that this is the time for them to be in government, etc. So yeah, that's the overall look at the Dutch elections. I was particularly having fun on the night. It was a great watch, and yeah, I just imagine it will be a continuation of the existing status quo. What do you think, Peter?
Well, besides the fact it looks like you robbed all my notes, I'm joking, of course. But I was going to say, it's a continuation election. I mean, VVD did well. Mark Rutte, obviously, won another mandate as the largest party, and will obviously continue his coalition because the math is there anyway. I mean, they would have, I think, 78 seats. It would just be a respectably good majority. Look, the other thing will be interesting now is the coalition arrangements, how they will work. I would expect D66 for coming into second and having a good night that they will ask for more at the expense of the CDA, who went down that night, which means that this D66 leader very well could be the next finance minister and deputy prime minister of the Netherlands.
Yes, and that is 100% where they're going. D66 want that finance ministry, not only to sort of kick out the idea of austerity in the country, but also to bring about a more pro-EU look, because the VVD have had such a tight grip over the finance ministry. And that's really what's controlled the sort of direction of a lot of their governments. So this definitely could be the chance for the leader of D66, who is a very charismatic, a very
Progressive.
very progressive, very exciting politician for a lot of people. That's their real chance to try and establish themselves. Because the real concern with going back into the status quo, besides the fact it's the only real chance, is that they had a lot of their votes were borrowed from other left-wing parties who put their votes towards D66. And the real question is, would those D66 new voters
Voters.
want to stay around if they are stuck with the same thing? So that's why if they get the finance ministry, that's where things can change completely, and D66 can really establish themselves. It can play off really well, and maybe they can rival VVD, or it can fail immensely and they lose those votes and drop down to their normal position. That's the real thing we could possibly see playing here in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting. I mean, that's been a CDA posting in the last government, which the CDA ran very much as a tight ship of financial responsibility. And mostly every government since Ruto's been in charge, every ministry, I should say, has had a right of center person leading the finance department. So it'll be interesting to see what that happens. CDA had a really bad night. The leader looks like he's probably going to have to resign. Because he had just been appointed to said position, ironically, just a few months ago. And now, obviously, it looks like his journey in the political spectrum is coming to a lovely end, which is the brutality of politics, woke Heitskra. And for the Christian Union, I mean, they stayed where they are and probably will be rewarded with being back in government. But it's interesting to see.
Sorry, just continue.
Oh, you look annoyed, so I'll let you talk.
No. Sorry, no. I'm not annoyed at all. I'm tired. Is the issue? Continue, please.
No, but now it's interesting to see where the left goes with this, because this is one of the more dismal performances across the board.
Yeah.
For Socialist, Labor, and Greens. What direction do they take, especially for the Labor Party, which has been on a downhill decline since 2017? When it was an equal second partner to the VVD, and then at the election crashed and burned. Do they try something new? Do they try some new strategy to try to revive themselves, or do they just continue on being?
I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's a huge similarity between the Israeli Labour Party and the Dutch Labour Party in that the reason why it's been claimed that the Dutch Labour Party have fallen from that real height that they used to have is because of this, them adopting third way sort of progressive centrism or whatever you want to call it, and it's not working out for them well. So maybe there will be a situation like in Israel where they get a character like Merav Michaeli, obviously a Dutch version. But yeah, that's just speculation of ideas of how they could maybe come back into the potential political sphere. Though another quick thing that Archangelic has just pointed out, which is fantastic for them to have done so, is that the possibility of the Labour Party actually joining back up joining with the Green Left and merging together and presenting a new progressive front, which is definitely an idea that I've seen talked about in Dutch media from stuff I've read. But who knows if it's something that would actually pull out.
Right, and would the two parties be able to coexist under one tent? Because there's always the issue when you unite two parties into one, always factions are going to want certain old beliefs to be at the front center of it. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. The right, I mean, there was all this talk that Geert Wilders was going to be second, but he went down, and at the expense of other right-wing parties that have, took his voters away. But it's interesting now to see the right isn't necessarily the right wing, I should say, very right wing, of the Dutch Parliament isn't just Geert Wilders anymore. It's a combination now of different personalities who now occupy that sphere, who all range in whatever wackiness they believe in. Since we have him, and then we have the party Forum for Democracy, which of course had this infamous anti-Semitism and racism scandals.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There's also Volt Europa. I mean, I think it's cringe. They're a cringe party, but That's of course your Euroscepticism in a nutshell from yours truly. Um, but yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. And it will be quite fascinating to see the new government and what the opposition looks like. Can the left find that leader to bring them back, or will the next 4 years be defined by Rudel's final, arguably, term, or does Rudel continue on for 4 more years and even break the record more? Well, it's an interesting fascination to look at.
Will will he ever go away?
LOL.
Will Rudolph ever actually go away? Is he the Benjamin
Speaking
Netanyahu of
as going away, we now move to Israel and Ix election this week. I think it was on the agenda. I believe that's what Eric had down.
the Israel election?
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, I did mention last time. I'll do it at the luge of the week because it kind of ties into who I've chosen
Okay,
for
fair
it.
enough. Just because it's close enough, we might just give a quick rundown, but just something quick.
I mean,
If you'd
sure.
like.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. So as we all know, I say we all know, maybe you know, the Israeli public is going to the polls once again for the fourth time in under 2 years, and they will be, and they will be electing their government. I went over last week the parties that are running, and now I will do the fun job of giving you a brief breakdown of what the poll shows, and if there is any way out of this hellhole for Israel. So, over the last 2 days, we've had the very exciting crunch period in Israeli polling because today is actually the last. It was 40 minutes ago was the when election silence began. No polls can be published from there on. So, what do the polls show in this period? And this period is fascinating because the sample sizes increase massively. Ultimately, Israel usually has a sample size of about 600 people. This brings it all the way up to 1,000, 2,000, even 6,000 participants in a poll. Unheard of for most Israeli elections. For most Israeli polls. So yeah, that's just the general idea of why these polls are interesting, because hopefully the larger sample size will maybe tell us if they're more accurate. So yeah, let's give a brief idea of what's happening here. So most polls paint that the Likud party of Benjamin Netanyahu will get about 31 seats, way higher. I say way higher, about about 4 points higher, or 4 seats higher than they've sort of traditionally been getting in the last few polls. You know, some have been showing them getting 27 to 29. Now it's going all the way up to 30 to 32. So, you know, a bit of a bigger increase. And this usually happens at the end of a election period where people are, those undecided voters are trying to decide where they want to go, and they seem to be flocking towards the good. So the other parties, the very lovely parties that I'll have to try and go through, let's start with the main opposition party, Yesh Atid, headed by Yair Lapid, the main Liberal Party in Israel. They're predicted down from about 20 seats to about 18 to 19. One poll shows them on 17. So a little bit down, but there we are. So yeah, just to try and summarize the rest of them, I'll just go through the real interesting ones. Yamina and New Hope. Yamina and New Hope have had a very, very fascinating election cycle. You got to see Yamina go all the way up to about 25 seats being polled. At that same poll, Yamina was on 25, Likud was on 28. So they started at a huge high, and now they're polling at about 8 to 10. So they have dropped off massively. Let's also go to the New Hope. New Hope, when they first entered the political scene, about 16 to 20 seats. Now they are all the way down to getting 8 to 10 as well. These two political parties have shed their supporters entirely across this election campaign, and it sort of goes off to who my loser of the week is. But yeah, this is not a good thing for the anti-Netanyahu Israeli right. Though Yamina isn't really that anti-Netanyahu, it's a bit more complicated. But that brings me on
Opportunistic more, but
yeah, he's a bit in the middle. And that brings me on to what will happen. On election night, let's say that, who can even try and, come up with an idea of what's going to happen on the election night. But things look like, based off polling, that they will Netanyahu's coalition will either need Yamina to go over the edge of and get 61 seats, or even with Yamina, they won't make it. That's the possibilities we're leading up to. So there is a very strong possibility that Israel may get a Netanyahu-led government, but if he doesn't, then there is almost no way that the opposition will be able to organize themselves. Yamina, when they started saying that, oh, we won't sit in a government led by Yair Lapid, they were polling a little bit higher. But now when they're on 8 to 9 seats, no way, if they achieve that result, could they actually lead a government. So, yeah, and their inability to work with Yesh Atid means that if there's not, and this is my overall prediction, if there isn't a Netanyahu majority, Israel will be going to a fifth election in some time. I believe it will be about August or maybe later. Yeah, fifth election is the only other possibility. So yeah, that's just the summary of it. It's I'm not looking forward to election night and staying up and
Well, of
covering
course,
it.
5 days away. Who knows? We may decide to do an election daily.
Sure. I mean, probably. I mean, it depends. I make sure to follow Asia Elects for the coverage.
Of course, we could always have a joint coverage of that. Fun.
Indeed, I will be. I'll be posting exit polls. Results from the night. I'm going to have a lot of. I'm hopefully going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to have a lot of snacks and a lot of drinks while going. Not like alcohol or anything, but the next day. But I'll have some of my Pepsi Max.
Yeah, Pepsi is great. No, it's interesting. That for once, it's very, Likud is closing strong in the polls. Historically, there tends to be this.
They always do, yeah.
That they don't finish strong, but in the final result, they're stronger. So it might be interesting to see if this is a narrative breaker, or whether this, for once, might be the difference where Likud overpolls prior to an election. But I think your point is absolutely spot on. I think if there has been a real trend, it's been that the anti-Bibi coalition has been so unorganized and messy at each other that they're just hurting themselves in order to try to form something. I mean, we've seen New Hope and Yanama go right after each other. Then we've seen Netanyahu play a trick basically on them, saying, "You want Yair Lapid as prime minister? That's who you're getting. No other alternatives."
Yeah.
So splitting off the right, and there have been other parties. Labour is probably going to have a good night in terms of returning back to a more respectable footing. But as you mentioned, there's a good chance that Likud very well could be, and their allies could be very close to that line.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be a mention of what you think of Netanyahu. And I sort of have changed my views on Netanyahu from what I used to believe in him and what I believe now. Knows how to play the campaign ball.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to talk about a big election stunt he did, or should I say, try to do. He said that, so in a Jerusalem Post sort of led event, Yair Lapid said that he wants to become prime minister. And prior to this, Netanyahu had said, I will debate Lapid 1-to-1 if he says that if he's going to be prime minister. And this is like 6 days away from the election election day actually being there. It's obviously quite close. And that would be the first like PM type debate Israel would have had in 22 years. Bibi knows that last time this happened, all the way back, and I believe it was in 1996 or something like that, he won his campaign because of an election night debate, and that's what made it for him. And so he's hoping here he can do the same thing again. Now the issue is that Yesh Atid and Yair Lapid has said, nope, I don't want to do it. It seems like you're posturing, and we don't believe you're being serious about this. So, does that, erode confidence that Yair Lapid actually wants to take a fight against Netanyahu? A whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's a fascinating election campaign to be watching.
And you mentioned that debate. That's the funny thing is because prior into that debate, Netanyahu, this is when most people that know about him, was a pure underdog against, a legend in Shimon Peres. And did well in that debate. And I brought up the infamous, Israeli line of, went to sleep with Peres and woke up with Netanyahu.
Yeah. It's really what led for a lot of last minute voters to go, I'm going Bibi.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the result. My personal guess is that Bibi will probably be back, and that Yamina probably goes into government with
Yeah.
Netanyahu, and they probably have the majority.
I'm gonna be not so sure and say I think there'll be a fifth election, mainly so I have something to do for Asia Lex.
True.
Please, Israel, give me, let me continue my job.
Oh yeah. Well, look, Asia Lex has a fun job. When you get to map up how much the LDP wins its fall election by.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on those voter identification polls. Anyway, um, yeah. Anyway,
Anyway, moving
shall
on
we
to the
move on?
Africa section.
Yes, the Africa section. So allow me just to quickly pull up the thing here. I was just too caught up on talking about Israel, I forgot my notes. So yes. Now, excuse my pronunciation here for the Tanzanian president, John Magufuli, who has died at age 61 after COVID rumors. So specifically, it was stated that he died from heart complications that had been brought about from COVID-19. So this is one of the most sort of like COVID skeptic person you could find in not only Africa, but also in the wider world. Specifically, he's said a number of things, like, for example, that COVID is a hoax, that ultimately it's not something that if a Christian would be able to survive COVID-19 because it would burn through them. He said things like, "Oh, countries shouldn't be shutting their economy, because of COVID, because ultimately it isn't something that's going to affect them." He said things like, "Oh, you can pray it away." A number of different awful things, as you can imagine, someone being skeptical. Now, obviously, it's not good when someone dies. However, this person has died because of something they didn't believe in and never took the precautions for. So, take that as you will. Ultimately, his death has led to quite an interesting thing, quite actually. So his death means that Samia Suluhu, again, apologies for the pronunciation, means that she has become the president of Tanzania, which means that Tanzania now has their first ever female leader. And also, it's, I believe, the first ever female leader for an East African country.
That's correct, yeah.
So quite monumental there in his death. So she is quite an interesting figure in that she has been in politics, or Tanzanian politics, for a very long time, but is like not that out there. So, for example, when you were looking at his Magufuli's actual reign as president, not much was really spoken about of his vice president. But now, ultimately, yep, out of all the things that the world tonight is good at, pronunciation is not on the list. Yes, I know. Don't remind me. So yeah, now they have a new.
Why we're not English students at all.
Yeah, exactly. A female head of state. And it will be an entirely different contrasting presidency out of what was previously expected. As I said, more soft-spoken, more sort of, not introverted isn't the right word, but not as out there, not as bombastic, and stuff like that. So there we are. Yeah, so I think that's just an overall look. He has died of COVID-19, and his legacy will sort of be marred by that fact that he definitely didn't have a good response. I think that's the Africa section over. I apologize
if I'm not on the Africa section.
I apologize if I'm not my cheery self today. I have had a very tiring and draining day.
Well, you look like a LibDev employee, at central headquarters after the exit polls were released. Sorry, I just had to throw that jab in. But no, but to the point about the Africa section, I think, it's very sad to see this person died, but he obviously had denied the seriousness of COVID and the dual irony or dual fate, if you want to say, came back to bite him. And I believe this is the second African leader to die of COVID recently, if I recall correctly.
Possibly.
which is very sad to see on a continent that is not yet eligible for the vaccine and or probably will get it anytime soon. So the African continent will have to suffer a lot more with this virus that some of its leaders have played down for political and religious reasons that is very sad to see. Now, I think we have a question about a regional election. I don't have a damn clue about this. You might be able to answer that, Adam.
I have no idea. I apologize.
Yeah.
I believe that Oblast is in. Is it Russia? It's either Russia or Ukraine. Apologies, my geography is awful. Either or, they haven't had local elections for a while, so apologies if that's me being ignorant. Sadly, despite the fact that it's called.
I'll check quickly. I think that's what I'm trying to check right now.
Cool. So despite being called the world tonight, I only have so much knowledge kept up here.
To be fair to this person who asked the question, I had no idea said place existed, and from my understanding,
Next
what
one's
I can,
20.
it was found in 2020. They got their last one in 2020, so I believe it'd be in 2025.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's in Russia. Cool. I was right there. Fantastic. Yeah. So they had regional elections. I believe it was last year actually. So it will be quite a while. Oh, maybe that specific place had them before. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to everyone's favorite section of the week. Bruiser of the week.
Oh, I thought we had another segment left on the thing. I think we had U.S.-China summit in Alaska. I think that was our last segment. Then we go to Loser of the Week.
Apparently so. I do not remember this, but that's probably just my failing memory at this time. Please go ahead.
Yes. So, of course, I'm sure many of you have been aware the U.S. and China have been exchanging lovely diplomatic, jabs at each other via the fun world that is the internet and communications. Poor Adam looks like he's going to fall asleep.
No, don't worry.
No, I've just had to, you put it like that, like someone just gonna fall on the mattress. Like, geez, I didn't realize I'm Larry King just without the charisma. But no, they've had these jabs, and this week the United States and China met in Alaska of all places, to have a lovely diplomatic summit. Which the beginning of the summit was a media-filled tirade filled against the U.S. and China, both taking shots at each other with cameras rolling. The U.S. accused China of engaging in illegal activities and defrauding the world and whatnot. China accused America of being hypocritical and mentioning its racism problems, and saying that America shouldn't be lecturing China on anything. So, of course, jabs were made, and this, of course, comes in a time when the U.S. and China's relationship could be described at best non-existent, which of course has a big impact in the world as a summit of this nature that has turned more into a shouting match about which country has done worse. It's quite always lovely to cover because to me, this in particular, the diplomats wanted the cameras to roll off the diplomatic attack. So thoughts on this summit?
Well, you've summarized it perfectly there. I just want to say that this is not the only exciting drama in terms of international politics for the United States. We also have had Joe Biden calling Putin a killer, to which Putin said that he wants to debate Joe Biden. Oh my God. The United World Federation is finally here, and our two head of state candidates are finally having the final vote. Debate.
I mean, someone joked that someone I follow joked that they should have that debate, and each one should just bring out the nuclear arsenal codes and basically tell the world that the joke there about their power structure. But
yeah, obviously Switzerland would moderate it. The Swiss leadership, I believe, their council, they can set forward the debate stage. Beat CNN or Russia Today. Obviously not comparable, but wouldn't.
We could always have it on the BBC as a neutral source.
Sure. I mean, why not? Let's bring the whole world together for this. I can't wait for it. We're going to have, who would be in this? I'm just trying to think now. You'd obviously have people in the stands. You're going to have your Kim Jong-uns of the world. They're going to obviously be holding their little Putin signs.
All the nuclear weapon states, I'm sure, will be on standby listening to this conversation with great interest.
Exactly. No, I don't know. It's such a stupid thing. Why does the world do this to itself? Or why?
Boris would probably just be eating his curry along with the other fun things they do.
Exactly.
But no, this offer was hilarious. Of course, Putin's response to being called a killer was basically to say, well, I'm sure Joe Biden has probably killed lots of people, well, effectively alluding to that.
I mean, obviously, entirely different situation in reality, but what are you going to
All right,
expect?
and that was my next point, but
Yeah,
of course, scientifically, that of course, LOL or like, or it could just be him going shirtless into that debate because there's that infamous picture as well. Um, but yeah, so U.S. and China had a lovely jab at each other, and the relationship between the two superpowers, if anything, continues to deteriorate. And they just had a fun time yelling at each other in Alaska.
yep, as you do.
And now we move to
That's
the
probably
loser of the week.
yes. Hello, it's me, your favorite person who loves giving you Loser of the Week nominations. Today we have Naftali Bennett is my nomination for Loser of the Week this time round. Primarily because of the stuff I related to when I said the Israel stuff. It's just because his party has shed so much, and given that the actual election is happening next week, I thought it'd be good to call him the loser because ultimately he has taken his party so far down from what would be expected. And ultimately, like everything from his economic plan as wanting to be like Singapore has completely failed in terms of being able to get through with the Israeli public. And also, his surrogates on TV have also had a very poor reception. So, yeah, that's just generally the reason why I think Naftali Bennett is loser of the week. And oh yeah, to be fair, you shouldn't call Naftali loser of the week. They might follow Asia Lex. Naftali Bennett, if you're listening to this, why do you follow Asia Lex?
He
Why
maybe
don't you
likes
like
your coverage of your polling, and maybe it's
he
when he can
doesn't like
scream
any
at
of
his.
it. Why doesn't he like any of it?
Maybe
Also,
he just.
right, it doesn't even make any sense because right, I'm just going to go on a tangent for a second. Right, so sorry, Peter, for your lose of the week nomination, but I just have to say this. Right, so as a part of his party, there is this guy called Jeremy Salmon. Now, he is a candidate from Philadelphia. I believe it's Philadelphia or somewhere like that. Or maybe he's from Indiana. I can't remember specifically. Anyway, so he runs this page, or used to run this page called Jeremy Knesset, which is a poll aggregation site. So basically, was the main competitor to Asia Lex during the first Israeli election. We ultimately surpassed him in followers, and we've done way better coverage. No offense, Jeremy, if you're listening, your coverage is awful. You don't cover every poll, and for some reason, despite the fact that guy is on his list and a member of Yamina he's like 18th on their list or something silly like that. Despite all of that, he still decides to follow Asia Lex to get his polls. That doesn't tell you that he has awful people as part of his party. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
Well, that's always fun to hear that. My loser of the week. Well, that's always a fun category to choose, but I'm going to choose Emmanuel Macron for saying this week that he is saying that he knows a lot about vaccines because he's read books about epidemiology in terms of the Oxford vaccine, which of course is a loser of the week because come on, man, you're not a doctor, you don't know anything about healthcare. First, I was told Macron was a student of finance, student of art, student of this, student of that. So
I
yeah,
mean,
loser. Oh, sorry.
the general EU response towards the AstraZeneca vaccine and promoting conspiracy theories about it, like the whole blood clot thing, is ultimately going to screw up their already terrible response in terms of their vaccination. So if this is the route they want to go down, ultimately it's not going to work out too well in the end. But that's
Yes,
just
and it's always fun to see people defending the EU on Twitter timeline, of course, because person shall not be named, but it's always good to defend the EU when they probably have a disastrous vaccine rollout.
yeah.
But no, yes, he says he's a self-proclaimed epidemiologist who now knows the effects of vaccines, and that's why he's not having the AstraZeneca vaccine in France, which of course is hilarious because the vaccine is still safe.
And actually, I'll just as a final note before we head off, I'm going to nominate a King of the Week. Obviously, King meaning good person. Now, I'd say just do this as a one-time thing because I saw it on Twitter before I came on. But the Prime Minister of Italy has said that he will take the AstraZeneca vaccine. Obviously, standing against other
Based?
European. Sorry.
I said based.
Yeah, exactly. Based. Maybe some that's just an example of a leader actually trying to stand up for the country, when ultimately what is happening is countries with already low acceptance rates of vaccinations, like France, are already going to be in a worse state by this continued sort of conspiracy theory by their leader. So there we are.
Well, I know. I mean, the irony is, not to make a jab here, who knew the country that left the European Union would probably be the first one to be out of the mess? Fun
Thank you,
times.
Super Mario. Very cool. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Super Mario is very based. But anyway, we end the show from England, my car.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love your car. Where are you actually right now? If you, I mean, do
I'm
you know, like, you can say as a joke. That's mainly what I was hoping for.
well, no, I'm outside the house of the Dutch Prime Minister, waiting for a
Of course.
response about
Has he continued?
when he decides to form his government.
Do you see him apparently on his bike in his plain-looking
Yeah, I
shirt?
see him passing by. The police are very annoyed at the fact that the journalists are right here up the edge.
Oh dear. Anyway, it's been a very lovely evening. I'm gonna get some sleep after this. Um,
Yeah. All
so
right,
thank you all
Kelly,
for
to be fair, we are not going to go that round. We are not going to do base and cringe. We still have some standards on this show.
Well, you never know. Anyway, so thank you all for listening to The World Tonight. It's been a very lovely show today. Thank you all, everyone in the chat, for being super active. It's always a fun time to get to interact with people. And yeah, I hope you all have a fun rest of the week. And then for next week, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and also to subscribe on to any podcast sites that you use to also get this amazing podcast. Because you know what? Who wouldn't want this kind of amazing things, video?
Exactly. Fun, man. And just
Please,
as a quick question in the chat. No, they are not going to proportional. It will just be the standard French system at the current time. But
yeah.
anyway, have a great night. And if you can get the vaccine, get vaccinated. Bye.
Yeah, yeah.